Ambassador Yuna stood at the viewport of the human transport ship and watched the capital world of the Velnorian Empire grow larger. The planet was beautiful, in a cold way. Its surface was covered in silver cities and dark oceans that reflected no light. Massive orbital stations circled it like rings, each one armed with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. She had been chosen for this mission because she was patient, because she could smile when she wanted to scream, because she understood that peace required sacrifice, and she was willing to make those sacrifices. The Velnorian Empire had been expanding for 300 years. They had conquered over 40 species and absorbed their worlds into their territory. Humanity had avoided conflict with them so far. But that was changing. The border between human space and Velnorian space was getting smaller every year. Trade disputes were becoming military standoffs. Something had to give. So Earth had sent Yuna to negotiate. To find common ground. To prevent a war that would cost millions of lives on both sides. Her assistant, a young man named June, approached her with a tablet in his hands. He was nervous. She could see it in the way he held himself, in the slight tremor of his fingers. "Ambassador, we have received final clearance to dock at the Imperial Station," he said. "The Empress herself will receive you in the throne room." Yuna nodded slowly. "That is unexpected. Usually, these things begin with lower officials." "Perhaps it is a sign of respect," June offered. "Perhaps," Yuna said, but she did not believe it. The Velnorians did not respect anyone. They tolerated those who were useful and destroyed those who were not. An audience with the Empress meant something else entirely. It meant they wanted to make a statement. The transport docked without incident. Velnorian soldiers in black armor met them at the airlock. They were tall and thin, with gray skin and eyes that held no warmth. They did not speak. They simply gestured for the human delegation to follow. Yuna walked with her head held high. Behind her came June and 4 other diplomats. They carried no weapons. They wore no armor. They were protected only by the ancient laws of diplomatic immunity that every civilized species in the galaxy honored. The walk to the throne room took nearly an hour. The Imperial Palace was vast beyond reason. Every hallway was lined with statues of conquered species, frozen in poses of submission. Every room held treasures stolen from 100 worlds. The message was clear. The Velnorians were collectors of civilizations. Finally, they reached the throne room. The doors were 50 meters tall and made of some black metal that seemed to absorb light. They opened without a sound. Inside, the room was filled with thousands of Velnorians, nobles in fine clothes, military officers in decorated uniforms, priests in dark robes. All of them watched in silence as the human delegation entered. At the far end of the room, on a throne made of crystal and bone, sat Empress Thalvex. She was ancient by Velnorian standards, over 500 years old. Her body was thin and fragile, but her eyes burned with a fierce intelligence. She had ruled the empire for 3 centuries. She had ordered the deaths of billions. Yuna approached the throne and stopped at the proper distance. She bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect but not submission. "Empress Thalvex," she said clearly, "I bring greetings from the United Earth government. We come seeking peace between our peoples." The Empress did not respond immediately. She studied Yuna the way a scientist might study an insect. Then she raised one thin hand, and the room fell even more silent. "Peace," the Empress said. Her voice was like ice cracking. "You speak of peace while your species poisons my subjects with your ideas. Your broadcasts reach my worlds. Your culture infects my people. You teach them that they are equal to their betters." Yuna kept her expression calm. "We share our culture freely with anyone who wishes to receive it. We force nothing on anyone. That is the problem," the Empress said. "Your very existence is a challenge to the natural order. You humans believe that all beings deserve freedom, that all voices should be heard. These ideas are dangerous. They must be stopped." "We came to negotiate," Yuna said, "to find understanding between our peoples. Surely there is a path forward that benefits both of us." The Empress smiled. It was a terrible thing to see. There is a path forward. But it is not the one you expected. She raised her hand again, and soldiers moved. Before Yuna could react, she was surrounded. Strong hands grabbed her arms and forced her to her knees. Her delegation shouted in protest, but they were quickly subdued as well. "What is the meaning of this?" Yuna demanded. "We are protected by diplomatic immunity. This is a violation of every treaty in the galaxy. Treaties are made by the strong to control the weak," the Empress said. "When the strong no longer need them, they become meaningless. You came here expecting to negotiate. Instead, you will serve as a message." She stood from her throne and walked slowly down the steps toward Yuna. Every movement was deliberate. Every second was designed to increase the terror. "Your species has become too confident," the Empress continued. "You spread your ideas without fear of consequences. You believe that your words can protect you. Today, the galaxy will learn otherwise. If you harm me, there will be consequences," Yuna said. Her voice was steady even though her heart raced. "Earth will not ignore this. Earth will do nothing," the Empress replied. "Your kind does not have the strength to challenge us. You are soft. You are weak. You value individual lives too much to sacrifice them in war. That is your greatest flaw." She gestured to a nearby officer, who handed her a blade. It was long and curved, made of the same dark metal as the doors. "This will be broadcast across the galaxy," the Empress said. "Every species will see what happens to those who challenge the natural order. Every species will remember that humanity is not special. You are just another civilization waiting to be collected." Yuna looked up at the Empress without fear. In that moment, she thought of Earth. She thought of her family. She thought of all the people who had placed their hope in her mission. She had failed them, but she would not give the Empress the satisfaction of seeing her beg. "You are making a mistake," Yuna said quietly. "You do not know what humanity is capable of." The Empress laughed. It was a sound like breaking glass. "I know exactly what humanity is capable of. Nothing." She raised the blade. Across the galaxy, billions watched as the broadcast went live. They saw the human ambassador forced to her knees. They saw the Empress standing over her with a weapon in her hand. They saw the blade fall. And in that moment, every species in the galaxy learned that diplomatic immunity meant nothing to the Velnorian Empire. That peace was impossible. That the strong could do whatever they wished to the weak. On Earth, in the great council chambers of the United Government, leaders watched the broadcast in silence. When it ended, no one spoke for a long time. Finally, Admiral Tejo stood. He was an old man with a face carved from stone. He had served humanity for 50 years. He had fought in a dozen conflicts. He had seen terrible things, but he had never felt rage like this. "They want to know what humanity is capable of," he said. His voice was cold and steady. "We will show them." No one disagreed. 3 days passed after the execution of Ambassador Yuna. The galaxy waited to see what humanity would do. Many expected protests. Some expected economic sanctions. A few thought there might be minor military action along the border. No one expected silence. Earth went quiet. No broadcasts. No diplomatic messages. No threats. The human government simply stopped communicating with the rest of the galaxy. Ships that had been in transit turned around and went home. Trade agreements were canceled without explanation. Human citizens living on foreign worlds began quietly leaving. The Velnorian Empire celebrated. The Empress held grand feasts in her palace and declared that humanity had been broken, that their spirit had been crushed, that they had learned their place in the natural order of things. She was wrong. Deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, in a facility that did not officially exist, Admiral Tejo stood before a massive display screen. Around him were the highest-ranking military officers in human space. Every one of them had watched the same broadcast. Every one of them carried the same cold anger in their hearts. "The Empress believes we are weak because we value life. Tejo said. She believes we will not fight because we fear the cost. She is about to learn how wrong she is. He pressed a button, and the screen changed to show a map of the galaxy. Red dots marked every known Velnorian military installation. Blue dots marked something else entirely. For the past 80 years, humanity has maintained a hidden fleet, Tejo continued. Ships that do not appear in any official record. Crews that have trained in secret. Technology that we have never revealed to anyone. The Velnorians think they know our strength. They have no idea. A younger officer, Captain Hana, stepped forward. She was small but carried herself with confidence. Her specialty was intelligence gathering, and she had spent the last 3 days without sleep. We have mapped the Empress's security in detail, Hana reported. Her palace is protected by 300,000 soldiers. Orbital defenses include over 200 weapons platforms. Ground-based shields can withstand bombardment from an entire fleet. So a direct attack is impossible, another officer said. Hana smiled slightly. A direct attack would be costly, yes. But we are not planning a direct attack, Tejo nodded. The Empress made this personal. She did not simply refuse our diplomatic offer. She killed our representative in the most public way possible. She wanted to humiliate us. She wanted to show the galaxy that humans could be treated like animals. He paused, and his expression grew even harder. We will answer in kind. We will not bomb her cities. We will not destroy her fleet. We will go directly to her. We will take her from her throne, and we will execute her in exactly the same way she executed Ambassador Yuna. The room was silent. This was not the kind of mission humanity usually attempted. It was not safe. It was not clean. It was revenge. Pure and simple. How? Someone asked. Captain Hana brought up a new display. The Empress holds a celebration every year on the anniversary of her coronation. It happens in 37 days. During this celebration, security is actually highest, but there is also the most movement. Servants, entertainers, foreign dignitaries. Thousands of people enter and exit the palace. We will use that movement to insert a small team, Tejo said. They will reach the throne room. They will capture the Empress. And they will broadcast her execution to every corner of the galaxy. Who leads this team? Hana asked. Tejo looked at her directly. You will handle intelligence and coordination from orbit. The ground team will be led by Major Do Yun. At the back of the room, a man stepped forward. Do Yun was neither tall nor particularly imposing. He looked like someone you might pass on the street without noticing. That was exactly why he was perfect for this mission. My team is ready, Do Yun said simply. We have been training for operations like this for years. We know the risks. We accept them. You may not survive, Tejo warned. Ambassador Yuna did not survive either, Do Yun replied. She went to that planet knowing the danger. She gave her life for peace. We are willing to give ours for justice. The planning continued for hours. Every detail was examined. Every possibility was considered. The Velnorian Empire was vast and powerful, but it had weaknesses. It relied too heavily on fear. It assumed that conquered peoples would never rebel. It believed that military might was the only thing that mattered. Humanity had different beliefs. Meanwhile, on the Velnorian homeworld, the Empress received reports from her spies. They told her that Earth had gone quiet, that human military forces were not mobilizing, that there were no signs of an attack. They are afraid, she told her advisors. Just as I predicted. Humans talk about freedom and equality, but when faced with true power, they cower like all the others. Her advisors agreed with her because disagreeing with the Empress was dangerous. They praised her wisdom. They celebrated her victory. They assured her that humanity would soon send new ambassadors, ready to accept whatever terms the Empire demanded. None of them noticed the small changes happening around them. A servant who had worked in the palace for 20 years was actually a human operative who had been placed there decades ago for just such an occasion. A trading company that supplied luxury goods to the nobility had been quietly purchased by a human shell corporation. A scientist working on the orbital defense systems had been convinced to share certain access codes. Humanity was not idle during those 3 days of silence. They were preparing. Captain Hana worked without rest. She coordinated information from hundreds of sources. She built a complete picture of the palace, down to the location of every guard and the timing of every patrol. She identified which nobles might be sympathetic to rebellion and which were loyal to the Empress. She found the weaknesses in systems that the Velnorians believed were perfect. The biggest challenge is the final approach to the throne room, she told Duyun during one of their planning sessions. There are biometric scanners that check everyone who enters, Velnorian DNA only. Duyun considered this. Can we fake it? We have samples of Velnorian genetic material. Our scientists are working on a temporary modification. It will be painful and dangerous, but it should work for a few hours. Then we use it, Duyun said without hesitation. 20 days before the coronation anniversary, the hidden fleet began to move. Ships slipped through empty regions of space, avoiding all normal travel routes. They positioned themselves at key points along the hyperspace lanes that connected the Velnorian homeworld to the rest of the Empire. When the time came, those ships would prevent any reinforcements from reaching the Empress. They would isolate her completely. They would ensure that whatever happened in that throne room stayed in that throne room until it was too late. On Earth, the public was told nothing. They knew only that their government was handling the situation. They trusted that something would be done. They did not know the scale of what was coming, but Admiral Tejo knew. And as he watched the final preparations come together, he allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The Empress had wanted to send a message. She had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about power and submission. She was about to receive a message of her own. The coronation anniversary celebration was the grandest event in the Velnorian calendar. Every noble family sent representatives. Every conquered species sent tribute. The palace was filled with music and light, and the smell of exotic foods from 100 worlds. Major Do Yun walked through the crowded halls with a tray of drinks balanced on one hand. He wore the simple uniform of a servant. Gray and unremarkable, his face had been surgically altered to appear Velnorian, with gray skin and narrow features. The genetic modification burned in his blood like slow fire, but he showed no sign of discomfort. 4 other members of his team were scattered throughout the palace. Each had their own role. Each had their own path to the throne room. If one failed, the others would continue. The mission was more important than any individual life. Position check. Hana's voice whispered through the tiny device hidden in Do-Yun's ear. Server 3 is in the east wing, came the first response. Server 2 is near the guard barracks. Technician 4 is in the communication center. Entertainment 5 is approaching the main hall. Do-Yun waited until the others had reported before speaking quietly. Server 1 is on schedule. Approaching the throne room entrance. Copy all, Hana replied. Orbital assets are in position. Hyperspace interdiction will activate in 2 hours. Once that happens, no ship leaves or enters the system. You will have 4 hours to complete the mission before reinforcements can arrive by sublight engines. 4 hours to capture an empress in a palace defended by 300,000 soldiers. It seemed impossible. But Do-Yun had learned long ago that impossible was just another word for difficult. He continued walking, keeping his head down, and his movements unremarkable. The servants here were invisible to the nobles. They were tools, not people. That blindness was a weakness Do-Yun intended to exploit. As he passed through a narrow corridor, he encountered a checkpoint. 2 guards stood beside a scanner, checking everyone who passed. Do-Yun approached calmly and placed his hand on the scanner. For a moment, nothing happened. The genetic modification had to fool the machine into thinking he was Velnorian. If it failed, the mission would end here with his death. The scanner beeped green. The guards waved him through without a second glance. Do-Yun continued on, his heart beating steady despite the danger. He had trained for moments like this. He had prepared his mind to accept death as simply another outcome. Fear was useless, only focus mattered. In orbit above the planet, Captain Hana watched dozens of screens at once. She saw the positions of every team member. She saw the movement of guards throughout the palace. She saw the Velnorian fleet sitting peacefully at their stations, completely unaware of the human ships hiding in the darkness beyond the system's edge. "The Empress is moving to the throne room," Hana reported. "She will begin receiving guests in 30 minutes. That is your window." On the planet's surface, the team members adjusted their positions. They moved through crowds and corridors, each step bringing them closer to their target. Years of planning came down to these final moments. Du-Yun reached a service entrance near the throne room. It was guarded by only 2 soldiers, both of them bored and distracted by the celebration noise coming from the main hall. He set down his tray and approached them with a bottle of expensive wine. "Compliments of the kitchen," he said in perfect Velnorian. "The head chef thought you might appreciate something to warm your duties." The guards looked at each other. They were not supposed to drink on duty, but the wine was clearly expensive, and their superiors were all busy with the celebration. What harm could one small break do? They took the bottle. Du-Yun smiled and bowed and walked away. Behind him, he heard them open the wine and begin drinking. The sedative would take effect in 10 minutes. They would not die. They would simply sleep until the mission was over. Du-Yun was a soldier, not a murderer. He would kill if necessary, but never without reason. Similar scenes played out across the palace. Guards were drugged, doors were unlocked, security systems were quietly disabled from the inside. The machine that protected the Empress was being dismantled, piece by piece. And she had no idea. In the throne room itself, Empress Thalvex sat on her crystal throne and received the endless line of nobles who came to pay their respects. She was dressed in robes of black and gold, with a crown of dark metal on her ancient head. Every few minutes, she raised a thin hand to acknowledge some particularly important guest. She was happy. The execution of the human ambassador had sent exactly the message she intended. Other species were more obedient now. Tribute payments had increased. There was even talk of expanding the empire further, taking human colonies as the newest addition to her collection. Humanity had proven to be as weak as she always believed. They had done nothing. They had accepted their humiliation. They were already forgotten. Outside the throne room, Do-Yun and his team gathered in a service corridor. 5 people against an empire. It should have been laughable. But they were not ordinary people. They were the best humanity had produced. "Final positions," Do-Yun whispered. Each team member confirmed. They were spread around the throne room at different access points. When the signal came, they would all move at once. "Hana, activate the broadcast systems," Du-Yun ordered. In orbit, Hana's fingers flew across her controls. Human ships that had been hiding behind moons and asteroids suddenly powered up their communication arrays. They connected to every broadcast network in the galaxy, overriding local signals with a priority emergency code. "Broadcast ready," Hana confirmed. "When you enter that throne room, every inhabited world in the galaxy will be watching." Du-Yun took a deep breath. He thought of Ambassador Yuna. He thought of the way she had knelt before the Empress without fear. He thought of her final words, warning the Empress that she did not know what humanity was capable of. It was time to show her. "Move," he ordered. 5 doors opened at once. 5 figures stepped into the throne room from different directions. The guests closest to them barely had time to look confused before they were pushed aside. Du-Yun walked straight down the center aisle toward the throne. Guards rushed to stop him, but his team members intercepted them. Small weapons appeared from hidden places. Shots were fired. Bodies fell. The throne room erupted into chaos. Nobles screamed and fled in all directions. More guards poured in from side entrances. But they were met by the human operatives who had been hiding among the servants all along. The palace's own staff turned against their masters. Empress Thalvex rose from her throne. Her eyes were wide with something she had not felt in centuries. "Fear. What is this?" she demanded. "Who dares attack me in my own palace?" Du-Yun stopped 10 meters from the throne. Guards surrounded him, weapons raised. But they did not fire. They could see that he was not afraid. They could see that killing him would not stop whatever was happening. "My name is Major Do-Yun of the United Earth Military," he said clearly. His voice carried across the entire room. 37 days ago, you executed Ambassador Yuna in violation of every law of civilization. You believed there would be no consequences. You were wrong. The Empress stared at him. For a moment, she could not speak. Then her face twisted with rage. "Kill him," she ordered. "Kill all of them." The guards raised their weapons. And then the lights went out. Every system in the palace failed at once. The power grid, the communications, the defense network. Everything went dark and silent. In that moment of confusion, Do Yun's team moved with perfect coordination. They had trained for years in complete darkness. They knew exactly where every enemy stood. When the emergency lights finally flickered on, the throne room had changed. The Empress's personal guards lay unconscious on the floor. Du Yun stood directly in front of the throne, a weapon pointed at the Empress's head. "You wanted to send a message to the galaxy," Du Yun said quietly. "Now we will send one of our own." Temening. The broadcast began with a simple image. The throne room of the Velnorian Empire, seen from above. Emergency lights cast everything in red shadows. On the floor lay the unconscious bodies of guards who had served the Empress for decades. Standing in the center of the room was a small group of humans, their weapons steady, and on her knees before them was Empress Thalvex. Across the galaxy, billions of beings stopped what they were doing and watched. On worlds that had been conquered by the Empire, slaves looked up at public screens with disbelief in their eyes. On free worlds, governments held emergency meetings to discuss what they were seeing. On Earth, families gathered around their devices and watched in silence. No one spoke. Everyone understood that something historic was happening. In the throne room, Do Yun stood before the Empress with a calm expression. His face still bore the marks of the genetic modification that had allowed him to infiltrate the palace, but his eyes were purely human, cold and determined. "Empress Thalvex," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the broadcast. "You have been charged with crimes against humanity and crimes against the civilized galaxy. 37 days ago, you executed Ambassador Yuna, a representative of the United Earth government who came to you in peace. You violated diplomatic immunity. You murdered an innocent woman to send a message of fear." The Empress looked up at him with hatred burning in her ancient eyes. Her crown had fallen from her head. Her robes were torn. She looked nothing like the powerful ruler who had terrorized the galaxy for 3 centuries. "You think this changes anything?" she hissed. "I have ruled for 300 years. I have conquered 40 species. My empire spans 1,000 worlds. You are nothing. You are insects playing at war." "We are human," Du Yun replied simply. "And we do not forget." He stepped aside, and a screen activated behind him. It showed the recording of Ambassador Yuna's execution. The galaxy watched again, as the Empress raised her blade over the kneeling human woman. They watched as the blade fell. They watched as Yuna died without begging or crying. When the recording ended, Do Yun spoke again. "Ambassador Yuna came to you seeking peace. She offered friendship between our peoples. She believed that even the darkest hearts could find light. You answered her kindness with murder." He gestured to one of his team members, a woman named Sujin who carried a long case in her hands. She opened it and removed a blade. It was identical to the one the Empress had used to kill Yuna. "We found this in your private collection," Du Yun said. "You kept it as a trophy, a reminder of your victory over the weak humans who came begging for peace." The Empress's eyes widened as she recognized the weapon. "You cannot do this. I am the ruler of the greatest empire in the galaxy. Killing me will start a war you cannot win." "We are not starting a war," Du Yun said. "We are ending one. The war you started when you killed our ambassador." Around the throne room, the remaining Velnorian nobles and guards watched in stunned silence. Some had tried to flee, but the exits were blocked. Some had tried to fight, but they had been quickly subdued. Now they could only watch as their Empress knelt before the humans she had called insects. In orbit, Captain Hana monitored the situation with careful attention. Human ships had activated the hyperspace interdiction field. No reinforcements could reach the planet. The Velnorian fleet was scrambling to respond, but they had no orders. Their chain of command led directly to the Empress, and she was in no position to give commands. "Major, you have 2 hours before the interdiction field fails," Hana reported through his earpiece. "Recommend completing the mission and beginning extraction." Du-yun acknowledged the message with a slight nod. He turned back to the Empress. "You believed that executing Ambassador Yuna would break humanity's spirit," he said. "You believed we would become afraid and submit to your will. You underestimated us." "What do you want?" the Empress demanded. "Surrender? Tribute? Name your price." "There is no price," Du-yun replied. "There is only justice." He handed the blade to an older man on his team. Admiral Tae-ho had insisted on being part of the ground operation. He was too old for this kind of work, but no one had the authority to stop him. Yuna had been like a daughter to him. He had personally recommended her for the ambassador position. Her death weighed on his soul. Tae-ho took the blade and walked slowly toward the Empress. His movements were stiff with age, but his hands were steady. "I knew Yuna since she was a child," he said quietly. "She believed in peace. She believed that even enemies could become friends. She gave her life for that belief." He stopped in front of the Empress and looked down at her. "You took something precious from us, something we can never get back. Now you will face the same fate you gave to her." The Empress tried to rise, but guards from her own palace held her down. They were the servants who had been secretly working for humanity. They had lived among the Velnorians for decades, waiting for this moment. "This is not justice," the Empress spat. "This is revenge." "Yes," Tae-ho agreed. "It is, and the galaxy will remember it." He raised the blade. Across the galaxy, viewers held their breath. Some turned away. Some watched without blinking. Some prayed to whatever gods they believed in. On conquered worlds, slaves began to whisper among themselves. If humans could bring down the Empress, perhaps they too could fight back. Perhaps the Empire was not as invincible as they had believed. On free worlds, leaders reconsidered their alliances. The humans had done what no one thought possible. They had reached into the heart of the Empire and taken its head. That required respect. In the throne room, the blade fell. The Empress died the same way Yuna had died. On her knees, in front of the entire galaxy, at the hands of those she had called weak. When it was done, Tae-ho lowered the blade and stepped back. His face showed no satisfaction, no joy, only a deep, terrible sadness. "Ambassador Yuna deserved better than revenge," he said to the broadcast. "She deserved peace. She deserved a galaxy where species could live together without fear. We have not achieved that today. But we have sent a message." He turned to face the camera directly. "To everyone watching, human and otherwise, remember this. We do not seek war. We do not desire conquest. We want only to live in peace with our neighbors. But if you harm our people, if you murder our diplomats, if you believe we are too weak to fight back, remember what happened here today. Remember that humanity will never submit. Remember that we will find a way to answer any crime against us, no matter how powerful the enemy." He dropped the blade on the floor beside the Empress's body. "The Velnorian Empire will need new leadership. We recommend choosing leaders who understand the value of peace. We will be watching. We will be watching." Du-yun gave the signal, and the broadcast ended. The team began their extraction, moving through the palace toward the landing zone where a stealth transport waited. Behind them, the throne room was chaos. Nobles fought for power. Guards tried to restore order. The empire that had seemed so stable was suddenly uncertain. One execution had started this. Another had finished it. Now the galaxy would learn what came next. The extraction went smoothly. Du-yun and his team reached the stealth transport without serious opposition. The palace was in complete disorder. Guards fought each other as different noble families tried to seize power. No one paid attention to the small group of servants slipping away through the chaos. Captain Hana guided them through the safest route, her eyes never leaving the tactical displays. "Transport is lifting off," she reported to Admiral Tae-ho, who sat beside her on the command ship. All team members accounted for. Tae-ho nodded slowly. He looked tired. The mission had been a success, But he felt no triumph. Only emptiness. What happens now? Hana asked. Now we wait, Tejo replied. The Empire will react. The galaxy will react. We have started something that cannot be stopped. He was right. Within hours of the broadcast, the Velnorian Empire began to fall apart. The Empress had ruled through fear and absolute authority. Without her, that authority meant nothing. 3 of her children immediately declared themselves the rightful heir. 5 major noble houses announced their independence. A dozen conquered worlds rose in rebellion. The empire that had taken 3 centuries to build began to crumble in a single day. On Earth, the government made no official statement. They did not need to. Every being in the galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of. Every leader understood that Earth was not to be underestimated. 1 week after the execution, representatives from 11 different species arrived at Earth seeking alliance treaties. They had watched the Velnorian Empire abuse weaker civilizations for generations. They had lived in fear of conquest. Now they saw a chance to align themselves with a species that could protect them. Earth's diplomats received them cautiously. We are not seeking to build an empire of our own, they explained. We want peace. We want trade. We want friendship between species. But you will fight if necessary, one representative observed. We will defend ourselves and our friends, the diplomats confirmed. Nothing more, nothing less. The treaties were signed. Earth gained allies it had never expected. The balance of power in the galaxy shifted. 2 weeks after the execution, the new Velnorian government sent its own diplomats to Earth. They were led by a young prince named Velkan, one of the Empress's many grandchildren. He was different from his grandmother. He had traveled to human space as a student. He had learned their language and studied their culture. He understood them in ways the Empress never had. I do not come seeking revenge, Velkan told the Earth Council. My grandmother made a terrible mistake. She believed that power came only from strength and fear. She was wrong. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect that no Velnorian noble had ever offered to humans before. I come seeking peace. Real peace. The kind your ambassador Yuna wanted. The council listened carefully. They did not trust easily. The memory of Yuna's execution was still fresh, but they recognized that holding on to anger would only lead to more death. Peace requires trust, Admiral Tejo said. He had been given a seat on the council after the mission. His voice carried weight that few could match. Trust requires proof. What can you offer us? Velkan straightened. My grandmother kept records of all her crimes, not just against humanity, but against every species she conquered. I will release these records to the Galactic Council. I will allow independent investigations into every act of brutality the Empire committed. And I will begin the process of freeing every world that was taken by force. The council members looked at each other. This was more than they had expected, more than they had dared to hope. Why? Tejo asked. You could maintain your empire. You have the military strength. Because I watched the broadcast, Velkan replied. I saw what you did to my grandmother. I saw the message you sent. And I understood something she never did. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Power without justice is meaningless. Strength without wisdom is dangerous. My grandmother built an empire on fear. Look how quickly it fell. I would rather build something that lasts. Something based on respect and cooperation. Something like what Ambassador Yuna wanted. The negotiations continued for months. There were setbacks and disagreements. Old wounds were hard to heal, but slowly, carefully, a new framework emerged. The Velnorian Empire was restructured into a federation of independent worlds. Conquered species were given the choice to leave or stay. Trade agreements replaced tribute demands. Military forces were reduced and redirected toward defense rather than conquest. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was better than what had come before. 1 year after the execution, a memorial was built on the Velnorian homeworld. It stood in the plaza where Ambassador Yuna had been killed. The statue showed her standing with her head held high, just as she had stood in her final moments. Du Yun attended the dedication ceremony. He had retired from military service after the mission. The things he had done weighed on him. He did not regret them, but he could not pretend they had not changed him. Captain Hana stood beside him. She had been promoted to admiral after Teho's retirement. She would lead humanity's fleet into whatever future awaited. She would have hated this, Hana said, looking at the statue. The war. The killing. The revenge. Probably, Du-Yun agreed. But she would have understood why it was necessary. Do you believe that? Du-Yun was silent for a long moment. I believe she gave us a chance for peace. We had to fight to protect that chance. Now it is up to us to make sure her sacrifice was not wasted. Around them, humans and Velnorians mingled in the plaza. Children played together without care for the color of their skin. Merchants traded goods without suspicion. Soldiers from both species stood guard together, watching for trouble but expecting none. It was a small thing, a tiny moment of peace in a galaxy full of conflict, but it was a beginning. Admiral Teho watched the ceremony through a screen on Earth. He was too old to travel now, but he refused to miss this moment. A young aide brought him tea. Sir, do you think it will last? The peace? Teho considered the question. I do not know. Peace is fragile. It requires constant effort, constant vigilance. One moment of weakness, one leader who values power over justice, and everything can fall apart again. He took a sip of his tea and looked at the screen, where the dedication ceremony continued. But I have hope. Humanity has shown the galaxy that we will not be victims. We have also shown them that we prefer friendship to conquest. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps others will follow our example. The aide nodded. Ambassador Yuna would be proud. She would tell us not to waste time with pride, Teho said with a slight smile. She would tell us to get back to work. There are still problems to solve. Still bridges to build. Still peace to maintain. He stood slowly, his old bones protesting the movement. She was right. We have much work to do. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence. Every being in the plaza, human and alien alike, bowed their heads to honor the woman who had died seeking peace. Then the moment passed, and life continued. Trade resumed. Children laughed. The galaxy kept turning, but nothing would ever be quite the same. The universe had learned what humanity was capable of. They had seen the fire that burned beneath the surface of the soft-spoken species from the small blue world. Humanity came in peace. They always had. They always would. But the galaxy would never forget what happened when someone answered peace with blood.